You cut 200 calories a day. You stick to it for a month. And the scale barely moves. Frustrating, right? Meanwhile, someone else eats pizza on the weekend, hits a protein target, and somehow loses fat while keeping the muscle underneath it. What is actually happening here? By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how a calorie deficit works inside your body, and you will know whether protein really changes the outcome, or whether that is just another gym myth passed around without evidence. Start with the basic idea. A calorie deficit simply means the body burns more energy than it takes in through food. That energy has to come from somewhere. So the body turns to stored fuel, mostly body fat, to make up the difference. Simple on paper, but where does the daily number even come from? Total daily energy expenditure is the real number that matters, not just the calories burned during a workout. Most of it, often 60 to 70%, goes to keeping the body alive at rest. Breathing, circulating blood, repairing cells, regulating temperature. Researchers call this the basal metabolic rate. Then add digestion, which burns its own calories, known as the thermic effect of food. Add unconscious daily movement like fidgeting, walking to the car, or standing at a desk, called non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Only after all of that does actual exercise get added to the total. Take a simple example, someone with a total daily energy expenditure of 2,500 calories who eats 2,000 calories a day sits in a 500 calorie deficit. 1 pound of stored body fat holds roughly 3,500 calories of energy. Do the math, and a steady 500 calorie daily deficit works out to somewhere around 1 pound of fat loss per week, at least on paper. In practice, the body rarely behaves like a fixed equation, which is exactly why so many diets stall out around week 3 or 4. So when someone eats less, their body does not simply sit still and wait to lose fat, it reacts. Isn't that a strange thing for a system to do? As the deficit continues, the body adjusts. Hunger hormones shift. Ghrelin, the hormone that signals hunger, tends to rise. Leptin, the hormone that signals fullness and helps regulate metabolic rate, tends to fall. The body also becomes slightly more efficient, burning a few less calories for the same amount of movement. Scientists refer to this as metabolic adaptation. It does not stop fat loss. It just means the deficit that worked in week 1 might shrink slightly by week 8. That is why a plan that felt easy at first can suddenly feel like a fight. This is also why extreme deficits tend to backfire. Drop calories too aggressively, and hunger spikes faster than willpower can keep up with. Most people respond by overeating later, sometimes undoing days of progress in a single evening. A moderate, sustainable deficit almost always outperforms an aggressive one over several months, simply because it can actually be maintained long enough to matter. Now here is where protein enters the picture. Does it actually matter, or is it hype built by supplement companies? Start with hunger. Protein is the most filling of the 3 macronutrients, gram for gram. It slows stomach emptying and increases the release of hormones that signal satiety to the brain. Someone eating adequate protein while in a deficit tends to feel less hungry across the day, which makes the deficit easier to sustain. And a deficit only works if someone can actually stick to it. Then there is the thermic effect of food mentioned earlier. Protein has the highest thermic effect of the 3 macronutrients. Digesting and processing protein burns roughly 20 to 30% of its own calories, compared to around 5 to 10% for carbohydrates and even less for fat. That difference is small on any single meal, but it adds up across weeks. The biggest reason protein matters, though, has nothing to do with hunger or digestion. It has to do with what gets lost alongside the fat. During a calorie deficit, the body does not only pull from fat stores. Without enough protein, it will also break down muscle tissue for fuel. Muscle is metabolically expensive to maintain, so in a shortage, the body treats some of it as expendable. Losing muscle alongside fat lowers metabolic rate further, and it changes what the number on the scale actually represents. Picture 2 people, each losing 10 pounds over 2 months. One follows a moderate deficit, eats close to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, and keeps lifting weights twice a week. Most of that loss comes from fat, and strength in the gym barely changes. The other follows a steeper deficit and pays little attention to protein. The scale shows the same 10 pounds lost, but a noticeably larger share of it is muscle, and the numbers on every lift quietly slide backward. This comes down to a process called muscle protein synthesis, the process by which the body rebuilds and maintains muscle tissue using amino acids from protein. So what does higher actually mean here? Isn't more protein always better? Not exactly. There is a point of diminishing returns. Research generally points towards somewhere in the range of about 1.6 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight for someone in a deficit who is also resistance training, though needs vary by individual, activity level, and how aggressive the deficit is. Beyond that upper range, extra protein mostly just becomes extra calories, without extra benefit for muscle retention. This is not about eating unlimited protein, it is about hitting a specific target consistently. Picture what is happening at the cellular level during this process. Inside muscle fibers, amino acids from digested protein act like raw building material. When the body senses enough of them circulating, especially the amino acid leucine, it switches on a cellular pathway that triggers new muscle protein construction. Without enough amino acids present, that pathway stays quiet, and the muscle tissue is more likely to be broken down rather than maintained. The calorie deficit determines whether fat gets used for fuel. Protein intake determines whether muscle survives that process. Resistance training strengthens this signal even further. Lifting weight tells the body directly that the muscle being worked still has a job to do. That signal works best when enough amino acids are circulating for it to act on. Someone dieting while also training with weights and eating enough protein gives the body two clear reasons to keep muscle around. Remove either signal, the training or the protein, and muscle becomes a far easier target to break down for fuel. Combine the two ideas, and the full picture becomes clear. A calorie deficit forces the body to draw energy from somewhere. Protein determines where a meaningful share of that energy comes from, tipping the balance toward fat loss and away from muscle loss. That is the entire relationship in one sentence. Someone cutting calories and eating minimal protein may lose weight quickly, but a chunk of that loss is muscle, hunger stays high, and the whole process becomes harder to sustain and easier to reverse. Someone in the same deficit hitting an adequate protein target tends to stay fuller, holds onto more strength and muscle, and ends up with a body composition that actually looks and functions the way they wanted in the first place. A calorie deficit means burning more energy than is consumed, forcing the body to draw on stored fat for fuel. That deficit is influenced by resting metabolism, digestion, daily movement, and exercise combined. As the deficit continues, hunger hormones shift and the body adapts to become slightly more efficient. Protein matters inside this process because it increases fullness, burns more calories during digestion than other macronutrients, and most importantly, signals the body to preserve muscle tissue instead of breaking it down for fuel. Weight loss and fat loss are not the same thing, and protein is the variable that decides which one someone actually gets. The takeaway for the very next meal is straightforward. Build it around a clear protein source first, then fill in the rest. Not because protein is magic, but because it protects the muscle that a deficit would otherwise put at risk. Subscribe to FitLab for more science-backed breakdowns of how the body actually works, one topic at a time.